No matter what's on my bucket list, whether I am watching bison in Antelope State Park near Salt Lake City, or standing under the northern lights in Finland, or even trekking tigers in India, there's one thing that is always nearby. A knitting or a crochet project, sometimes both. Now, to be transparent, I do knit and crochet for a living. I've made some of the pieces that you see on screen in shows such as Stranger Things, Hocus Pocus, The Mindy Project, and countless other TV shows and films. But even if it wasn't my job, even if it was purely for fun, I would always have a knitting or crochet project with me on every single adventure. Because knitting and crochet solves problems that most travelers don't even realize that they have. And I'm about to show you exactly what I mean. Hi, I'm Krista, and I'm on a quest to check off 1,000 bucket list adventures. I'm a part-time RVer and full-time adventurer. I love to travel. And if you're anything like me and you love to travel, you'll know that knitting and crochet are the perfect companions for any adventure. It doesn't require electricity or even the internet. As long as you have your pattern, your yarn, and your needles or your hook, that's all you need. And I highly recommend that you always print out your pattern anytime you go on an adventure, because who knows if internet's going to be available, if your phone dies. There's so many things that can happen, and if you don't have that technology, as long as you have that printed out pattern, that's all you need. And of course, it doesn't take up very much space. It can. As you can see, I've got a lot of my yarn out that I've been reorganizing, and I do have quite a bit of it here in the RV. But when I go on an adventure, I don't take all of that with me, obviously. I just have a small project, a small bag. It takes up such little space, but it is vitally important for me to have those with me. I would rather have my knitting than like extra underwear. And I'm not even joking about that. So if you've got just a tiny little bit of space, you've got enough room for your knitting, your crochet. 1 or 2 projects is all you need, depending on how long your adventure is. But it's such a great hobby because it really doesn't take up very much space. And if you're smart about what project you bring with you on adventures, it's a really easy hobby that you can pick up and put down at any time. Now, of course, some projects and some patterns require you to know exactly what round you're on or row you're on, or have to get to the end of the row. But honestly, if you pick a project that is simple, interesting, but doesn't require you to be counting every single stitch, every single row, I don't recommend lace, then you don't need to worry about getting into a situation where you miss your train stop because you were busy counting rows. So be smart about what project that you bring. Make sure it doesn't require too much energy, too much brain power, and you can easily stop anywhere, throw it in your bag, jump off the train, go on your adventure, and when you're ready to pick it back up again, it's right there waiting for you, ready to go. Knitting and crochet are such great hobbies because you can do them just about anywhere in the world in almost any situation. I bring my knitting in my RV, obviously. If I'm going to be on a cruise ship, great place to get a lot of knitting done. If you're going to be going on a safari in Tanzania, there's a lot of downtime. We're going to talk about downtime soon, but there's a lot of downtime. So you can have that knitting with you in the Jeep, get a few stitches in while you're waiting for the lions to wake up, or maybe you're traveling from one city to another. Knitting and crochet can be done anywhere in the world in just about any situation. So whether you are in a hotel, a campground, on a cruise ship, on a boat, on a bus, on a train, planes, trains, and automobiles, you can work on your project in any of those situations. So let's be honest, knitting and crochet are kind of the ultimate travel companion. Next, let's talk about the ever so wonderful downtime in travel. Now, even if you have a really busy travel schedule, if you're anything like me, I do like to pack my schedules. Anytime I go somewhere new, I want to do everything and see everything. But the reality is travel is not 24/7. Yes, I am busy a huge percentage of the time, but you've got long car rides, you've got trains that you're waiting for or sitting on the train, there's airport delays. There's so many times in travel where you are not actively doing something and you have just this time to just sort of sit and twiddle your thumbs. Or you can pull out your knitting, pull out your crochet, get a few stitches in, and it really does help keep you relaxed. It helps that time go by quickly and you're able to do something productive during that downtime. And what about weather? There's definitely times where I've had plans to do something and Mother Nature had other ideas, and I'm stuck in the RV with it pouring rain outside, nowhere to go, and what do? I open up my laptop, turn on my Netflix, and do a little Netflixing. And that is a really great way to just enjoy those rainy days. I love the sound of rain on the roof. And so for me, rainy days, sitting inside knitting is probably one of my favorite parts about travel in an RV. And so because you can knit and crochet just about anywhere, I would love to know from you, where is your craziest place that you've ever pulled out a knitting or crochet project, and like, were people around you looking at you like, what are they doing? Leave that in the comments below and let me know the craziest place you've ever pulled out a project. Another thing that I love about bringing projects with me on my adventures is it kind of becomes a little bit of a souvenir of that location. So for example, when I was in Italy, I finished designing and knitting a hat, and I called it my Italy hat because every time I look at that hat, I think of Italy, and I remember the food and the culture, and I just remember how much I loved being in that country. And so that hat and that design sort of represents my time spent in that country. And so it kind of became a little bit of a souvenir. Or I was on the Dalton Highway finishing up a project. We were driving to the Arctic Circle, and I worked on a project and got it finished just as we got to the Arctic Circle, and so that became my Arctic Circle hat. And so for me, I love bringing projects to new places because those finished items kind of become their own memory of a place, and it's sort of a special memory just for me. Not a trinket that you can buy in a store, but a memory of, oh, I remember that hat. I knit it when I was in Italy, and then I photographed it all over Italy, and that's pretty cool. So if you are a knitter or a crocheter and you finish a project, you're probably always going to link that project to that place where you finished it or you were working on it, and that's kind of cool. It's a souvenir that you can't buy in a store. And as a designer, one of my favorite parts of combining travel and fiber arts is that my adventure often becomes part of my designs. Sometimes I know a bucket list destination is coming up and I create a design inspired by that place. Other times it's a landscape, a culture, or even a color palette I discover while traveling that eventually becomes a new design. And for me, I think that's pretty cool. I also find that bringing a project helps me sort of slow down and absorb a location better. It kind of gives you an excuse to go and sit in a cafe somewhere, pull out your knitting, and just people watch for a little bit. It really just makes you slow down, take in your surroundings. I personally have a really tough time focusing if I'm not doing something with my hands. Even right now, just talking to you, I would really love to be knitting, but I have to be counting on this project, so I can't talk and knit. But when I have my knitting and I'm somewhere, I can just sit and stitch and just look at what's going on around me and really appreciate the environment that I'm in. And another thing is that it helps me wind down from the end of my day. So I could be out just exhausted adventuring all day long. When I get back to my RV, I get in my pajamas, I sit in bed, Finny curls up with me, and I just sit and relax and knit. Even if it's only for 5 minutes because I'm pretty tired, that still is just sort of my way of winding down. If I'm traveling in another country, I do the same thing. I get back to the hotel, shower, get in my pajamas, get into bed, and work a few rows, even if it's a few stitches, and that just kind of helps me slow down, unwind from that day. And it also gives me some time to reflect on the day and all the adventures that I had. So even if it's just 5 minutes at the end of the day in a hotel and you're completely exhausted, it is still a great way to wind down. And as a part-time RVer, knitting and crochet are the perfect companions for me. Right now, I'm on the road for about 8 months, and I am definitely not going out and doing bucket list items every single day for 8 months. And so I really cherish the down days where we just decide we're not going to go anywhere. It's usually on weekends because weekends are always busy. I don't really particularly like to go to zoos and aquariums and hiking trails and all that on weekends because they're busier. And because I do have the luxury of being able to work on the weekends rather than the weekdays, I love to spend a good Saturday and Sunday just chilling in my pajamas, working on some knitting, working on some crochet, and just enjoying those weekends and that downtime. So if you're an RVer and you love to knit or crochet, you know that it's not just campfires and driving time where you can pull out your project. It's those evenings after getting the laundry done, after doing the dishes, because even though I'm kind of on like an 8-month vacation right now, I still have work to get done, and I still need to have that time to sit down and unwind and work on projects. And it's kind of my favorite thing to do, is to be in my pajamas, knitting, crocheting, snuggling up with Finny, and just enjoying a chill day. There are a lot of projects that I enjoy making. Of course, I enjoy making sweaters and blankets and shawls and things like that. But in truth, when I'm traveling, I keep my projects pretty small. Right now, I am definitely doing mostly hats a couple cowls, but mostly hats because they're small projects. I can throw them in a small bag. I can take them with me on a hike. It's not like I'm trying to carry around a sweater project. And I do know that a lot of people really enjoy knitting socks. That's not for me. I'm not really a big sock knitter. I love knitting hats. And so I do really try to bring very travel-friendly projects that don't require a lot of intense thinking on the patterns and I can pick up and put down whenever. So when I'm at home, the other 4 months or 5 months out of the year, depending on how long we're in the RV, when I'm at home, that's when I work on my sweaters and my blankets and my big projects. But when I'm traveling and I'm on the road, keep it small, keep it simple. I do like to work with more fingering weight yarn when I travel because you can get 400 plus yards in the same amount of space. You can get 100 yards of worsted weight. So you want to make sure that you pick projects and yarn and patterns that are going to be very complementary to travel. Nothing that requires a lot of thought and no big bulky yarns. And so speaking of projects that you can travel with, I have a book called The Wandering Knitter, and it is 20 patterns, and they are all fairly simple projects that you can take anywhere with you. I worked on the book when I was traveling, and so I needed to make sure that I had patterns that were easy to memorize, easy to work on, but I also really like for people to learn new skills. So there are 10 different techniques in there, everything from brioche to lace to mitered squares. And what's really great about it is all of the projects are very travel friendly. So check the link in the description below. I've got the link to where you can pick up that book. It's called The Wandering Knitter. And if you are a wanderer like me, you might really enjoy working on those projects because you can take them anywhere. And so as long as I am physically able to continue to knit and crochet, I am going to always have my projects with me on all of my adventures. As I said, I am on a quest to check off 1,000 bucket list adventures, and it doesn't matter where in the world that takes me, I'm always going to have a project nearby. Because knitting and crochet, they fuel my creativity, they help keep me focused in the moment, they help make travel more enjoyable, and every destination becomes just a part of my project. I don't really see knitting and crochet and travel as two separate things now. They are both just intertwined into this one amazing adventure that I've turned my life into. And if you want to see what projects I'm bringing on my next adventures, the new designs I'm working on, or you just want to come along for some bucket list travel while you stitch away along on your own projects, make sure you click subscribe and join me for this adventure. And before you go, I thought it'd be a little fun to show you a little behind the scenes of what it looks like to be a knitter, crocheter, and a traveler in such a tiny space. One of the questions that I'm asked so commonly is, do I wind my yarn in my trailer? And the answer is absolutely yes. I carry my Swift and ball winder with me. They tend to get into the RV before my clothes even do because they are more important to me than my clothes. And so stick around because I'm going to show you how I store my ball winder and my Swift, how I set it up, and how I wind yarn in such a small space. Because as you can see, most of the yarn that I get does come in hanks, and I want to make sure that I'm able to work on those projects on the road, and so having those tools with me is super important. So stick around and I'm going to show you how I do that. Thank you so much for being here, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider clicking subscribe. I'm going to be showing you all of my fiber adventures, RV adventures, bucket list travel. This entire channel is all about my love for the fiber arts crafts and travel, and I know so many of you out there love both just as much as I do. So click subscribe, join me on this adventure, and I will see you in the next video, but stick around because I'm going to break out the ball winder. Okay, bye! So having my ball winder and Swift with me in the RV is super important, and I'm going to show you how I store it and then how I set up my station. So the first step is to make sure the monster is out of the way, that she is tucked away somewhere where she's not going to get into trouble. And then up here I have these cubbies. And because the front of the RV is slanted, there's like a curved back, and it's a perfect place to store my Swift. And then I have a basket here to store my ball winder. So these are what I use to wind up my yarn, and I do keep my Swift in a case because it does get jostled around a little bit. If I had a case for my ball winder, I would probably have it. But set up my my Swift. There is a lip on this table, but I had my dad put in a block of wood so that I can easily clamp that down. That's nice and secure, and I have that Swift set up and ready to go. Then my ball winder, I have another block of wood over here in order to allow this to clamp down nice and easily. There, so I tighten that up and then set up my yarn. So just like any winding of yarn, come back, get it on my Swift, and clip my tails. I do try to wind up yarn a lot at once because we do use this space quite a bit, and having the table free in order to wind my yarn is not always doable. And then having the monster somewhere tucked away is also really important because she will absolutely play with this. And then if you have any issues getting your ball of yarn started, put a tiny knot in the end, and that's going to hold it. It's nice and secure. And then I get my yarn wound up. So this is a really easy way for me to set up my ball winder, get my yarn wound, and then put it away, and it's out of the way and somewhere safe and secure. It's not, of course, the most ideal situation. I would love to be able to set this up so that it's permanently up, but the reality is, you see how much space we have. There's just absolutely no way for me to keep this up. For one thing, this has to pop down when the slide comes in. This has to pop down. So there you go. That is how I set up my ball winder in Swift, where I store them. And as a knitter and crocheter and a yarn enthusiast, gotta have these with me no matter where I go. And voila. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next adventure.